Great to see you. My name is Mia Kim from Jeonju University. Today, I want to make a presentation about what I've researched up to now. The title of my presentation today is Rereading and Rewriting of African Americans' History and Life in the View of Toni Morrison through the analysis of her novel, Beloved. Let me explain the content. First, introduction. In this section, I will explain Toni Morrison's philosophy as a female Black writer. And I will mention about the purpose of my research on this topic. Next, the meaning of recalling and sharing. In this section, I will tell you about the value of reading and recalling and sharing in the context of African Americans' culture and convention. Third, the meaning of healing on the basis of speaking and hearing. In this section, I will briefly explain about African American silence and isolation. They could not be silent and isolated from the community and even themselves. So in that 5, they needed the means to heal their scar, their trauma in the white-dominated society. It was the speaking and hearing of each other and one another. Next, the meaning of restoration through relations. In this section, I will explain the process of how African Americans restore their identity as a complete human being. And then I will tell you about the conclusion of my research. Okay, so let me move on. Toni Morrison is the African American female writer who felt the duty as a Black female novelist to write a story of African American tribes and their village community. She insists that the role of African American literature is to maintain the forgotten and untextured African Americans' values and their folk tales, and to promote the Black spirit. With this historical consciousness, Morrison tried to recode the social and cultural vehemence of African Americans in American history. Morrison embraces African Americans' real life, dealing with a certain period of American history in her novels. Morrison strongly emphasizes to reread and rewrite African American history, and the study will focus on it. The emphasis of rereading and rewriting of African American history means to dig up the forgotten and buried truth by intention in American history. Morrison tries to use the diverse techniques and surrealistic factors to search and discover the truth of the history. It works for Black people to recall the fragmented memories and remember the forgotten things and share them with others. Not only white people, but also even Black people in American society do not want to face up with the truth on the back of history. Believing that the author's mission is to reread the distorted history of Black people and rewrite the forgotten past, Morrison has never been negligent in her principles of life. Morrison's belief in releasing the original spirit of Black history through acceptance and healing and conveying the values of freedom, fairness, and dignity to the Black people can be found in many of her works. She sincerely wanted to reveal the truth of African Americans' life in America, which had been hidden and buried intentionally at the back of the curtain of American history. Morrison claims that Black people need some device to dig out the buried truths to the world, and it is the duty of the writer as a Black woman. After the long journey of consideration about this question, Morrison could harvest the answer about it. It was a recalling of the past, and this study will focus on the device of recalling and sharing, which Morrison uses in her works on purpose. So likewise, Morrison constantly claims to restore African Americans' history by selecting the useful things from the past history. This is linked with Morrison's philosophy that African Americans must not be indulged into the illusion of American dream and keep themselves from assimilating into white society without their subjectivity. That means Black people should reject the norm set by the whites' own standards. Therefore, with this viewpoint of Toni Morrison, this paper researched the process of African Americans' long journey to restore their identity through digging into the forgotten and untextured Black people's history. Okay, in this section, I will tell you about the meaning of recalling and sharing for African Americans. To recall the fragmented past memories and collect and share them with modern people living their life in current American society is very important to heal African Americans, even though they evidently do not want to remember the painful truth. White people also want to avoid the past atrocity and be free from the guiltiness. Therefore, Black people and white people can't communicate truly, and there is a clear obstacle to reach the truth. They don't open their hearts to each other. They seem to communicate and coexist, but it is only superficial. This is not a real reconciliation and real coexistence. This is a serious issue Americans have to solve out, and Morrison always pursues the value of sharing, hearing, healing, and harmonization. Morrison has tried to examine the distorted reality of American history and policy, and the negative aspect of African American women's motherhood. For this work, Morrison emphasized to recall the past and share it with others. It is the way for African Americans to heal their scar in their mind. As we know, lots of African Americans have the trauma from the past memories in terms of the lynch, the insult, the audio they got in the reality. But as we can see, Morrison emphasizes Black people to be out of that shackle, tying up themselves from the society and from the real life of the past. So in this section, this study will focus on examining the meaning of recalling and sharing for African Americans through the analysis of main characters in Beloved, her novel Beloved. Okay, then let me move on. In this section, I will tell you about the meaning of healing on the basis of speaking and hearing. The distinguishable point of African American literature from other literature is that it delineates Black people's real life and their death as it is. It tells African Americans' harsh and long life journey, struggling for total freedom and liberation as a human being. It tells African Americans' first-hand experience in Black people's voice, not white people's voice. Spitting out their painful history and hearing and sharing each other is the best healing for African Americans, and Morrison tries to enlighten them to realize it and put it into practice in their life. This is the Morrison's philosophy, her thought on the role of speaking and hearing for one another. She strongly insists it will have the power to heal African Americans' hurt, and it will finally open their closed mind to the world. So Morrison wants to embrace her philosophy in this novel, Beloved, by using diverse literary techniques. The character of Beloved in this novel, Beloved, is positive and at the same time negative, attractive and also disgusting, non-visual person who can change her shape with a blank look. By using the character Beloved having the complex aspects, Morrison lets African Americans bring out their traumatic experience and get out of it. They can be out of the trapped past and truly grow up as a person. The process of their growing up is seen through the main characters of this novel, Seth, Beloved, and Denver. Let me move on. Okay, in this section, let me explain the meaning of restoration through relations for African Americans. In this novel, the character Beloved plays a role of catalyst for the redemption of her mother, Seth, in the way that Beloved stimulates Seth to recall the past painful memory and face it. It lets Seth realize the basic cause of her distorted pathological motherhood, which was originated from the experience with her mother. The hardest part of Seth's life was the fact that she mothered her daughter. She also has the sense of loss with the mother's relationship. The hope of saving these relationships comes from Denver, a daughter born by combining the courage of black women and the compassion of white women in the Ohio River, the border between the South and the North. As we can imagine, there is the reason Morrison just chose this location, the border between the South and the North, for Denver's birthplace. Morrison wanted readers to feel the hope of sincere reconciliation between the white and the black. We can read between the lines here and grasp Morrison's attention. Likewise, the restoration of human relations is one of the main themes in Morrison's works, which is significant in that the rebellious daughters come to understand their mother, and it evidently turns the daughters to have the strong will to overcome their own lives. So Barbara Ringney says as follows. As you can see, sharing one's own through the process of speaking restores one's ego and enables the movement from an object to a subject of oppression and exploitation to a subject. Okay, then let me move on. Now, let me tell you the conclusion of my research. On the basis of Toni Morrison's assertion, this study examined the direction of American society. They have to move on. The sad past of African American nations was painful but meaningful history. It includes the record of their ancestors' life who struggled and conflicted to survive and loved each other. Today, what African Americans have to maintain is to preserve their own hidden self and their identity, not the pathetic mind sticking to the past. True sharing and healing through speaking and hearing each other will be the best way American society can coexist equally and vividly. This is my conclusion of the research. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention.